Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. I'm your host. My name is Daphne Royse. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. Matt Dixon is a best-selling author with a bold new approach to sales. Matt has co-authored 3 books on sales strategy: The Challenger Sale, The Challenger Customer, and The Jolt Effect. Let's welcome Matt to share his secrets to sales success.
Hi, Daphne. How
Hello,
are you?
Matt.
I'm
I'm good.
doing well. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Please tell us who you are and what inspired you to write books.
Oh gosh, I sometimes while I am writing books, Daphne, I feel like who did I offend to end up having to do this because it's a lot of work. We just finished our 5th book. Just went to the publisher, another book on sales. I guess just to introduce myself, I'm a sales researcher. So I've spent most of my career studying what great salespeople do, how customers buy, what do customers want and expect from salespeople, what can salespeople do to be more effective. I've also we've written a book as well on customer service and customer experience and how do we deliver an experience that our customers will love and that will keep them coming back over and over again on this sort of thing. So, but yeah, I don't, it's funny. I guess our first book we wrote in 2011, it was The Challenger Sale, which you just mentioned. And I think at the time, I always had a personal goal of writing a book, partly because I went to graduate school and I got my PhD, and I think my mother always wanted to have one of her kids have a PhD because she was an English professor, but she never got her PhD, and I think she always wanted somebody in the family to get one. So I got one, and then I went into consulting and private sector work. So I never got to be a real academic, you know. And I think my mom was like, when I wrote the book, I think it was kind of like the seal of approval because that's what PhDs do. They go and write books and articles and things like that. So, but it's an interesting process. It's a lot of work. The one we just finished up, it's 330 pages and 75,000 words, and it took 6 or 9 months, literally every day, a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there, every weekend. I think my wife was not very happy with me because I spent every Saturday and Sunday working on it. But now I've handed it to the editor and they're working on it. So I've gotten through the hardest part, I think.
What are your 4th book and 5th book's titles?
Yeah, so the we wrote a book. So you mentioned the Challenger Sale, the Challenger Customer, and the Jolt Effect. Those are all books for salespeople. For instance, it could be somebody who's selling a product like a technology-based product, or it even could be relevant to a real estate broker, right? Somebody who's working with a customer on a purchase, whether commercial or residential. Um, our 4th book was called The Effortless Experience, and it was about how do the best companies in the world deliver an easy experience to their customers. Because it turns out the research shows that's what customers really want. They want the companies they do business with to make their lives easy. And unfortunately, most companies don't do that very well. They make our lives very difficult, right? It's sometimes the products we buy don't work. Sometimes we have problems and we have to call for help or call the call center or go to the company's website, and it can be a very frustrating experience. And so we studied what is it that the easy to do business with companies do differently. What is it? What are the things they do differently? The 5th book comes out next spring, and it's called the current title. They're probably going to change it at some point, but the tentative title is The Activator Way. And this was I think when you and I met in California a few weeks ago, this was some of the research I was talking about at that event. This was a study of partners in professional services firms. So people who sell advice for a living. So if you think about lawyers or accountants or consultants, that's a different kind of sale than if you're selling a product, because advice is very hard to, it's hard to touch, it's hard to feel, it's hard to evaluate. Um, You can't do a demo or a proof of concept with advice. It's a in what we would call a black box kind of purchase. It's not clear to the customer what they're going to get, and the very best people at selling those services do very different things, it turns out. And so again, that book is called The Activator Way. It's going to be published by Harvard Business Review Press in April of next year. April, I think, if I'm not mistaken, April 22nd is when it comes out. I was just told today. So
Wonderful. What is the biggest challenge in your writing?
I, you know, I think I've been really fortunate because all of the books I've worked on, we had a lot of data and a lot of research that to work with. I think oftentimes book writers or authors will say that they struggle with, writer's block. It's looking at a blank page and trying to think of what do I put on that page. And I don't think that was necessarily is the problem that I've had, but more it's historically all five books has been a challenge of how do I take all this research and this data and then turn it into something that people, if you hear that, hey, Daphne, this book has a lot of research and data. I don't know that that's a book that many people are going to want to pick up. It's not, it doesn't sound exciting. So what you have to do is take that and you have to weave a story around it and make it exciting and engaging for the reader. And how do you keep, yes, it's based on research, but you also need that storytelling element. And so I think that's kind of the hardest part is how do you take data and research and make it flow together, make it engaging, make it exciting, get the reader turning the pages. Um, and yeah, I think I'm not the fastest writer in the world either, Daphne. I think I spend a lot of time writing and then rewriting sentences over and over again to try to get the language just right. And that can mean many weekends and long nights working on books. So
When you do research with those data domestically or internationally, what
yeah,
data?
it's a really good question. So in our research, we've always controlled for international markets. So if we look at the Challenger sale, just one example, and we look at this data set that we base the book on, it was a data set of thousands of salespeople from many different industries. But what we made sure we did was we had salespeople in the research study in our data set that represented all of the major markets out there. So we had North America, we had Latin America, Europe, Middle East and Africa, Asia Pacific, Australia, New Zealand. And we just wanted to make sure that we could control for that because the last thing, I mean, many of the readers of these books are people who run sales for large global companies. And the market for these books is very global. So even if it's not a multinational company, it might be a company based in the in London or in Johannesburg or in Sydney or in Tokyo. And we want to make sure that the story would be equally applicable regardless of market. And so we're always careful to control for the differences. But I would also say that, it's one thing to control for those differences in the data, but how you apply the recommendations is going to vary a little bit in different geographic markets. And so I think we always try to also provide a bit of guidance to the reader that, look, the data says it's the same, but we know that selling in, we know that selling in Shanghai is different from selling in New York, is different from selling in Paris. And you've got to recognize the cultural differences as a salesperson when you're engaging customers in those different markets.
Does sales strategy change over time as generations change?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say yes. I think that buyers today, so most of my research has been on business to business. So it's not so much on business to consumer. It's more on business to business. So these are salespeople selling products and services to companies. And I think there's three big changes we've seen on the customer side. The first big change is, and this is something we write about in the Challenger sale, is that business, Daphne, when you and I go and buy something from Amazon or we go buy a purchase as consumers, let's say it's a new car or maybe it's a new mobile phone or, it could be a new pair of shoes, any number of things. We always go and do research. We want to understand What do the reviewers say about this product? How is it rated compared to other products that are similar? We want to talk to people in our networks, our friends, our family, our coworkers, our neighbors, etc. And I think what we're finding is that business customers are acting in very similar ways. So our research shows that by the time a business customer even talks to a salesperson, they're almost 60% of the way done with their purchase. So they've already decided, what are we trying to do? Which companies should we talk to? How do those companies compare to one another? They've talked to people in their LinkedIn networks and at events, and they've tried to get a sense of who's the best in the market. And then they reach out to the companies and they ask them for a meeting. And so that's a really tough place to be for a salesperson, because it means that you've lost the opportunity to shape the customer's understanding of the opportunity, and now you're just reacting to their own understanding, which they learned themselves by doing their own research, and sometimes they didn't really get it right. So it's a tough place to be. The second big change that we've seen with customers is customers today, they want to bring more and more people to consider the purchase, even small purchases. So imagine you're running a company and you're trying to make a decision about what kind of computers to buy for your employees. Should we buy, a PC? Should we buy an Apple product? What should we, like a Chromebook? What kind of computers should our people use? Even those simple purchases today, you're seeing a lot of people weigh in on those. So in the old days, 20, 30 years ago, one person would make the decision. It was usually the senior executive would say, this is the computer we're going to buy for all of our employees. Today, there's buying committees. So now you have lots of people sitting around and they're debating, what should we do and who should we buy from? And everybody's got an opinion. And that makes it really, really hard for the salesperson, because they've got to figure out who amongst all those people is my champion? Who is the person who's going to, help us win the deal? And then the last thing that we've seen in customers is there's a big increase in what we call no decision losses. A no decision loss is when a deal is lost, but the salesperson really doesn't understand why. They chase an opportunity, and then suddenly the customer stops responding to their emails. They stop showing up on the Zoom calls. They stop engaging. And eventually the salesperson will mark it in the system closed, lost, no decision, meaning it was a lost opportunity, but we don't really know why. Now, again, this is something that as consumers, we're all very familiar with. Think about all of the things you put in your shopping cart on Amazon or on other websites and you never end up buying. I actually looked the other day, and in my list, you know how you can save things for later in Amazon? I've got, I think, 200 things that I've saved for later. So it's a lot of things. And we do this a lot. We get this close to buying and then something prevents us from moving forward. And so we're seeing this happen a lot more with businesses today, that they're rethinking decisions, they're getting cold feet and talking themselves out of purchases. They're putting in the shopping cart and waiting until later. And these are not simple Amazon purchases. These are multi-million-dollar purchases in many cases, or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So those are the three big changes. And I think because of those changes, yes, we have seen selling change quite a bit. So today's salespeople, if the customer's out there learning on their own and doing all their own research, well, you've got to engage them even earlier, and you've got to show them the thing that they couldn't learn on their own. What's the thing as a salesperson that they need to know? That other trend we talked about big buying committees and more people weighing in, today's salesperson, it's not enough to go try to find the vice president or the chief executive and go to the senior most person. You've got to figure out who across the buying committee is going to be my champion. Sure, I need to talk to the person with the budget, but I also need to know, when the buying committee starts debating this, whose hands should I put my proposal in? Who's going to fight for me and lobby for me? And then lastly, these no decision losses, what is it that great salespeople can do today to make customers feel better about the purchases that they're about to make, to instill more confidence so they don't lose those deals to no decision? So I think those are the three big ways that that buying and selling have changed over the last, I would say, 10 to 20 years.
Just for my personal experience, most of the time when I do purchase, I will look for best customer service,
Yeah.
best return policy.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
probably what
Yeah.
I always looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big one. We our book, The Effortless Experience, we talk about the customer service experience specifically. And what we found was that, I think that companies like to talk about how they delight their customers and they deliver what we call the moment of wow, right? These exciting moments to their customers. What we found out is that when things have gone wrong, let's say you need to return an item, or you bought something and it broke and you need it to be repaired, or you need to be replaced, or you just want to return it, those moments are really critical. And what the best companies do is they try to make those moments as easy as possible for the customer. They don't want the customer leaving those moments thinking, wow, I was so delighted and surprised and it was amazing. You want the customer leaving thinking, that was really easy. That was much easier than I thought. I thought when I was dialing the phone number to call this company to tell them my product broke and I want to get a replacement or I want a refund, I was just getting ready for a fight. I knew it was going to go badly, but the company made it go really smoothly. It was surprisingly easy. Do you remember the when Staples had the easy button, in their commercials? That's how we want customers to think, that we as a company are pressing the easy button and we're making it surprisingly easy. And when we can deliver an easy experience, and I think the returns policy is a great example. How easy is it to return? This is a big part of the reason people love Amazon. They love Zappos, these Nordstrom, these kinds of companies that have very flexible, customer-friendly return policies. We pay for the shipping. All you need to do is drop it off at the FedEx or the UPS. All you need to do is come in and bring it to, no questions asked. Those are really easy experiences, and it keeps customers coming back again and again.
You mentioned earlier about customers. What action should a salesperson take when the prospect ghosts them? Just like
Oh,
this.
when you get ghosted? Yeah. So I think it's what most, so first let me say what most salespeople do when the customer is ghosting them. Most salespeople get very worried because they get worried that this customer who I thought was this close to buying now feels like they're going to ghost me. It's going to slip through my fingers. So what they do is one of three things. The first thing they tend to do is they try to convince the customer of all the benefits of the product. Daphne, I know we haven't spoken in a while, but remember how excited you were about when I showed you the demo of the product, or when you had a chance to touch and feel the product. You're so excited about that and what it could do for your business. Well, you're not going to get those benefits if you don't buy the product. If that doesn't work, what a lot of salespeople will do next is they'll try to scare the customer into action. And so we call this in sales fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so I'll say, Daphne, when we were talking, you were telling me about all these problems in your business, and you think that we can help you solve those problems. But we haven't spoken in a while, and I know your boss has asked you to go fix this problem in your company, and if you don't move forward, these problems aren't going to solve themselves. You can't wish them away, right? So I try to make you squirm a little bit and feel some anxiety, what salespeople would call realize the cost of inaction, of doing nothing. If those two things don't work, usually what salespeople do, the last ditch attempt is to try to offer a discount, right? We haven't spoken, but how about if I offer you 10% off if you buy this month versus waiting till next month? And this is very common. Now, what we find is that those techniques actually backfire more often than they work out. Because really what you're doing in those situations is you're frankly trying to scare the customer into action. But what the research shows is that you're using scare tactics to sell to a customer who's already afraid, but they're not afraid of the thing you think they're afraid of. They're not afraid of missing out. They're not afraid of the FOMO, if you will. What they're afraid of is the FOMO. The FOMO is the fear of messing up. And so when it comes to big business purchases, the reason that salespeople get ghosted a lot is that customers get really worried about what could go wrong if they buy the product. They may be totally convinced that this product will be perfect for my company. It's going to solve lots of problems. It's going to help us save money or make money or mitigate risk. But when you get down to it, they're worried about a few different things. They're worried, have I configured the proposal the right way? You offered me a 1 year contract, 3 year, 5 year. 1 year is the most expensive, 5 years the cheapest. I chose 3 year, but should we have chosen 5 year instead? They get worried about the way if it's a technology product, how they've configured the solution, how many how many licenses, how many seats, what kinds of integrations have we signed up for, all these things. The second thing they get worried about is that they haven't done enough research. They are worried that if they don't do all their research, then maybe some new information will come out after the purchase is made, and that will make the decision look like not such a great decision after all. And then the last thing they get worried about is that they're not going to see the benefits that you're promising. So maybe you're a salesperson, you're saying, Daphne, if you buy our technology, it's going to increase your sales performance by 10%. But if I put my name, if I take that 10% and I go and I convince my boss, the CEO, the CFO, to pay for $1 million for this solution because it's going to improve sales performance 10%. Well, what if it only improves it by 5%? That's still good, but my name was on a proposal and I advocated for something that promised a lot more. And that's something that customers get really worried about, that they are going to be associated with making a bad decision. And so in the Jolt effect, actually, we talk about the things that best salespeople do to help instill confidence with customers that you've made a great choice. Of all the different decisions you have to make, I've held you by the hand and I've guided you to make some smart choices. Secondly, you've done plenty of research, and even better yet, you're working with a salesperson who I've already read all the research and I can be your trusted advisor here. You don't have to read it all. You don't have to be an expert. And then the third thing is I can instill confidence that you're not going to be left holding the bag, but you are going to get what you're expecting. In fact, you're probably going to get more than what you're expecting. You're going to look like a hero, not like a fool for having your name associated with this purchase. So again, the Jolt effect is all about those techniques that great salespeople use to make customers feel more confident and get over the fear of messing up.
Let's talk about salesperson.
Sure. Yeah.
What kind of quality that must have in someone in order to be a good at sales?
Yeah, it's also a great question. I think there's a lot of research around personality traits that are beneficial for salespeople to have. But I think in my experience, having studied many, many salespeople, maybe I'll mention uh, uh, three or maybe three or four that I think are really important. So the first one is I think the great salespeople are self-determined. I mean that to say that they don't believe that they will only be successful if customers call them or if the market is in their favor, um, if their competitors raise their prices. There are a lot of salespeople out there who feel like success happens because of decisions other people make. It depends on the product I'm selling. It depends on the territory I've been given. It depends on our price schedule. It depends on what my competitors are doing. It depends on whether the customer decides they want to buy from us or not. It depends on what interest rates are doing and what the economy looks like. The very best salespeople believe deeply that their success is completely dependent on what they do, not what other people do. They believe that if they put in the work and they put in the effort, they will see good outcomes and good results. So I think that's one thing. I think a second idea I would throw out is this idea, and I wouldn't call this a personality trait, but a desire to be helpful. And I know that sounds kind of simplistic, but let me explain. I think the very best salespeople will tell you, and these folks will make a lot of money in sales commission. They're very successful financially, but they will tell you that that's not why they get out of bed in the morning. Why they get out of bed in the morning is they love helping customers. And that creates a very powerful sales approach. When your customer believes that the most important thing to you is that they make a great decision and that they are successful in their business and what's important to them, and that you don't really care whether they buy from you, they don't buy from you, they buy from a competitor, it doesn't make any difference to you. Your sole focus is being helpful to the customer and doing what's right for them. It's a very powerful sales approach, and it creates a lot of trust and goodwill between the salesperson and the customer. And then the last trait I will mention is resiliency. So, are we able to get up after we get knocked down? Do we have a thick skin? Because even the best salespeople in the world, they're probably going to be told no at least 50 or 60% of the time. And average salespeople will be told no 75, 80% of the time. And bad salespeople will be told no 95% of the time. So sales is a game of getting a lot of no's. And it's a game of being comfortable with that, being resilient, developing a thick skin, and not getting dejected. They've got to have a lot of buoyancy, I think, and a lot of resilience to be successful in sales. In a world where you get told no more often than you are told yes, you better be very buoyant and very resilient.
I hear different things. Sometimes I talk to salesperson. They say they're not good because they're introvert instead of they
Yeah.
are extrovert. Is that
Yeah.
really matters?
It's a good one. In our research, we have found no correlation between extroversion and sales success. We know we've spoken to many, many great salespeople. That activator research, the one I was talking about before the new book, we interviewed a law firm partner, a woman who is very, very successful. She's based in Washington, D.C. She has a $60 million book of business with clients, big, big global companies that she works with. And she said right away, she said, I am an introvert. I am not comfortable interacting with people and being in social situations. When she rides the train between DC and New York, she says she rides in the quiet car, where there's no phones and no talking. It's like the library. She said, when I go to a conference, I don't like going to the bar. I don't like going out to dinners. But when I'm at that conference, I know I'm in sales mode. And so I go with a checklist of people I want to meet and conversations I want to have. And I have to turn it on in those moments, but then it takes a lot out of me and I've got to go back to my hotel room to recharge, right? Introverts will tell you this. They can be extroverted, but it takes a lot of energy from them. But again, we've not found any correlation between being an introvert or extrovert and sales success. We find a lot of introverted, very successful salespeople.
How interesting.
You know,
What is the most common mistake people make in sales?
mm. I think there are a lot of a lot of this is how long is the podcast? I think is what I would ask. So I I would say if I had to pick one, I think one of the ones that people we talked about the jolt effect before and this idea of like don't try to scare. There's a time and a place to dial up the FOMO and make your customer nervous that they're going to miss out. But then there's a time and a place to, if you will, put your arm around the customer's shoulders figuratively and make them feel like it's going to be okay. You're making a great decision. I'm right by your side. We're going to be really successful. Let's go forward and not look back. And you, as a salesperson, you've got to understand when it's time to push and when it's time to, if you will, kind of pull or help your customer become more confident. I think one of the other ones, a lot of salespeople, especially in business to business, for the past 20, 30 years, have really been trained that it's the best way to sell is to go in and ask the customer what's important to them. So it'd be me sitting down with you, Daphne, and let's say you're the CEO of your business and saying, Daphne, what's keeping you up at night? And what are you really worried about? And what I hope is you will say something that I can attach my company's product to. You're worried about that. All of our customers are worried about that. Do you know we can solve that problem for you? And then I'll make a proposal. That's called needs diagnosis. It's also called referred to as kind of solution selling approach. And this is very common for salespeople. It has been for 30 years now. In our research around the challenger sale, what we found is that the best salespeople, they don't ask the customer what's keeping them up at night. Instead, what they do is they show the customer what should be keeping them up at night. They bring a new idea to the table, and sometimes those ideas are surprising and provocative for the customer, right? But they're designed to create a different dynamic in the sales conversation. Daphne, you may have done all of your research, but there's one thing that we know about this solving this problem that you probably don't know. Let me share that with you. And customers, it turns out, love that sales approach. They don't like being asked what's keeping them up at night. It's exhausting. It puts all the work on their plate. I interviewed a chief financial officer from a big bank a number of years ago, and he said that he hates that question when salespeople ask that question. And I said, well, why do you hate it? And he said, well, before I tell you that, he said, you know what really keeps me up at night? It's the fact that I'm going to meet with another salesperson in the next 20 minutes who's going to ask the same exact question. And it's very tiring for me. I'm not the salesperson. You're the salesperson. It's your job to sell. Um, and I pressed a little bit more, and what he said was really interesting. He said when salespeople ask that question, what they don't really appreciate is that they're going to meet with more CFOs from big banks, just like people just like me, in a week than I'm going to meet with all year. So bring that new idea. What are those other CFOs worried about? What are they working on? How are they using your products and services to deliver new value to their customers, to their shareholders, to their employees? That's what I want to start the conversation with. Bring something valuable to me, and then I'll answer your questions all day long. But don't start with a question like that, because it puts the job of selling on my plate, but you're the salesperson. It belongs on your plate.
So how can the salesperson show their value to customers?
Yeah, well, I think those two things I talked about before. I think one is bringing those new ideas, new ways to make money, save money, avoid risk, grow market share, engage employees or customers. Whatever the outcome is that you are helping your customers achieve, it's a new way to go do that. And again, it's so valuable for customers because it's typically something they don't know themselves. And as the old saying goes, they don't know what they don't know. And so when you can help them understand opportunities that they're not aware of, that's phenomenal, a phenomenal way to deliver value. The other one I mentioned as well, and I just repeat it here around the jolt effect. You know, customers don't want to feel like they're alone when making a purchase. They want to feel like the person, whether it's an individual consumer, buying their first home, whether it's a senior executive signing off on $100 million software purchase, they want to feel like the company and the person who's selling me this is right there at my side and they've got my back and there's a safety net. I'm not off on my own, but I'm with somebody who's, again, there's an old saying in sales, but is a trusted advisor to me. I trust them. I trust them to guide me to the right decisions, and I trust them to help me make sure that I'm happy with this purchase and that everything goes well.
Which book would you recommend that someone read first?
Ah, yeah, I would recommend. I think it really depends on what the problem is that you're experiencing. And I think if we go back to those problems, if your problem is that your customers don't really appreciate what makes you and your product unique, and they're forcing you to compete on price against your competitors, and they're boxing you out and bringing you in late, I would start with the challenger sale. If your problem is that you're having to herd cats and get all these members of the buying committee together, and you keep losing to committee, I would say start with the challenger customer. And if your problem is that you are dealing with a lot of no decision losses, you're losing deals, you just don't know why, I would start with the jolt effect. And then lastly, I would say if you're in a services business, right? If you're selling your own advice, if you're a lawyer, a consultant, an accountant, a banker, even real estate agents would be a good example of that. In that world, you're selling advice to the customer. And we just differentiate ourselves on the quality of the advice we sell to the customer. The new book, The Activator Way, will be a great resource to show you how do the best salespeople or the best people who sell themselves for a living and sell their own advice for a living, what do they do differently?
Well, good luck with you, Matt, for
Thank
your
you, Daphne.
fifth book.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me on the show.
And do you have a website or social media page where customer can contact you?
Sure, absolutely. Folks can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And then also you can visit our company is dcminsights.com.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Matt, for your time. That's insightful for sure.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you.